Welcome, everyone. Angela is going to introduce today's topic.
Yes, thank you for attending today's lockdown lecture. My name is Angela Kasperick, and I am the key account manager for Custom Craft Lens, and we're the U.S. distributors for iSpace, and hopefully I'll be your key account manager. This is a virtual workshop, so we like questions, we want interaction, participation. I already put our email address in the chat box, so feel free to use this with any questions you might have, or if during the presentation you have any questions, you can put it right in the chat box as well, and we'll respond to it. If you send me an email with your contact information, which is the email in the chat box, I will send you updates and promotions and personally reach out with you about our previous topics and the up and coming topics that we will be presenting. For some fun, we'd like you to send us a selfie, a picture of you during the webinar, and we are going to pick some of the practices and feature them on the iSpace website. Our first topic is going to be on contracts. Feel free to provide any input you might have, any questions you might have. We will all be part in answering them. So join me in welcoming Charl Laas and Jagrut Lallu. They are part of our iSpace team.
Thank you, Angela.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. Just from a personal note, I'd like to thank Custom Craft, and in particular Daren and Angela, for all their hard work and dedication, making all this webinars possible. So just a personal thank you for doing all of this. And then today, we'd like to talk about pearls I wish I knew. So we've talked in the last 3 weeks about how to design Ortho-K lenses, some basic troubleshooting that we should be paying attention to. We even spoke about the bespoke lens. So today we want to focus on, I can design a lens, but what do I do now? How do I manage the whole Ortho-K process? So when Jagrut just brings up the screen, we're going to look at some basic fitting pearls that we think most optometrists should be paying attention to when they fit Ortho-K, particularly any specialty lens, but we're going to focus on Ortho-K today. So Jagrut.
Okay, now, Charl, can you see my website screen there? So the Welcome to iSpace screen?
No, not yet.
Can
I
everyone
can see
else? You can see it. Okay, cool. Right. So first thing, just before we get into the presentation, just a couple of things from today. As we talk through some of these topics, what's going to happen is you may see some links in the chat screen. They would have, majority of it would have come from this area here, the knowledge base. And also our patient resources section. So the patient resources section looks like this. And it's just, everything's designed for anyone to have access to anything electronically. There are also in-practice posters and a few extra pieces that we can supply if you just go through Daren. There are a series of videos as well for insertion and removal. So these are all patient-centric, and this is around acquisition. What is orthokeratology? If we go over here into the knowledge base, you'll see a whole list of topics, and some of those topics we're going to talk about today. So without further ado, we just thought we'd just go through essentially what we call our lockdown lecture series and pearls I wish I knew, so this is where this lecture's going to be a bit more interactive. We're aiming for this to be between 30 and 45 minutes. And if we run out of topics, we can always carry on next week. So straight into it, we thought we'd talk about contracts and fees. I'd just like to invite Daren to start discussing with us about contracts in the US, and then Charl and I have got some input onto that as well. So Daren, can you give us a bit of a 101 on contracts for everyone?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important aspects of an Ortho-K practice, because it covers all aspects as far as your relationship with your patients. And so Paul Levine has graciously agreed to share his contract. So if you reach out to Angela, she'll be willing to provide a copy of that to you via email. And so I think I'll turn it over to the two practitioners that are hosting the meeting to discuss details.
Yeah, so in terms of contracts and things, look, when we first started iSpace, we were really grateful for the support we received from two big conferences in the US. One of them is Vision by Design and the old GOS, the specialty lens division there at the American Academy. And so as part of that, we've just got a really good relationship with them, and to be able to share Paul's contract, which is probably the AOMC's contracts that they are allowed to use, is just, we're really grateful to be able to keep passing on that knowledge and keep building that relationship. The other conference that we've been a regular attendee of is Global Symposium, GSLS. So that's Pat Caroline, Craig Norman, and Jason Nichols. And they've been extremely supportive as well. When we talked about contracts in New Zealand, we've got obligations of our patients and obligations of our practitioners. And it clearly outlines our fee structure as well as our the appointments we wish for them to attend. It also discusses things like your replacement lens policy. What happens if a lens breaks? As you know, with the iSpace lenses, the first 6 months we've got a manufacturing warranty with Boston Materials. So patients tend to like the fact that if something happens in that first 6 months, so a lens breaks or anything sort of happens, that they're covered. And then on top of that, in New Zealand, we will, at least in our practice, we offer a extension of lens warranty. So we like to gamble. So we take a view that for an extra X amount of dollars, we are happy to extend the warranty of 6 months to 12. And most of the time, patients don't actually use that, so it's a little bit of extra income for our practice. With respect to fees in New Zealand, I'll talk about New Zealand first, and I'll talk in general terms about the US because there's specific law governing what I can say over there. But I know that in New Zealand, I can very confidently talk to you about the fees that we charge over here because it's a different market. In New Zealand, there are not a huge amount of practitioners that practice orthokeratology. So the fee range or fee band is rather narrow. Most practices charge anywhere from a minimum starting of $1,700 or $1,800 for a new fit of orthokeratology, and that goes all the way up to about 3,000 New Zealand dollars. If I was looking at a range for, and the fitting, is based on complexity. So let's say, for example, a low myope with minimal or no astigmatism, that would be at the lower end, whereas a high myope or an off-label prescription would be slightly more complex. Now, in the US, obviously, you have to make considerations for on-label and off-label use. And just a reminder that the iSpace lens suite of products are used, are approved with the VST approval. And if anyone isn't certified, there is a whole certification process that you can go through, and you can click on our certification link through our knowledge base. With respect to the US, the other thing to consider, which is quite critical over there, is because the public are used to having plans, is making sure you have an annual plan, so an annual care plan. And this may include an extra set of reshaping lenses, your clinical care. We divide ours in New Zealand by chair time. So I have an hourly rate that we charge, and everything is user paid. So there's no insurance in New Zealand. So insurance is a very foreign concept over here. So everyone gets onto their plan, and they just have their renewal plan. They get their new reshaping lenses as and when required, and they just stick onto that, and then we use automatic payments. The big thing with the whole coronavirus is that a lot of these automated systems are getting better. So I'm sure there'll be some very low cost, easy to integrate into your EMR systems that you can do that that will allow for automatic payments and the collection of fees without necessarily the patient being there, or contactless payment. Charl, what do you guys do over in South Africa?
Something similar to that. I've just been typing away in the chat room for the South African optometrists. They welcome to contact Inocon, which is the local supplier in SA, and they have sample contracts and fee structures. We can't directly talk about fees in South Africa. That would be seen as collusion, but we can give sample invoices that people can use as a guideline as to what to charge. I just want to add up to what you've been saying. What the approach we took in the practice was, when we went to patients quoting them, I try to keep the fee structure simple and the same, in the sense that we try to take into account how many lenses we're going to use on this patient, how complex it is. So the fee that we've charged in the end, although it's broken down into components, the end value never changed, no matter what we did. So we took into account that we would use some warranty lenses. We won't finish with the first lens. We'll most likely use a second lens. So we brought that costing into the fee structure. We kind of take into account how many chair times we're going to have with the patient, how many times they're going to come in. We would incorporate that. So again, a bit of a gamble. If it was an easy fit and it went to plan, your profit margin was a bit better. If things didn't go to plan, you left enough fat in the fee to allow you to troubleshoot and spend extra time with the patient. At least from the patient's perspective, once they've heard the fee, they've accepted the fee, in their mind, that's a done deal. They don't want to come back and renegotiate extra fees because it hasn't worked. The other thing to consider also prior to starting the Ortho-K in your contract is to discuss an exit strategy. So what happens if the patient, let's say it's a child, after the first night of wear, does not want to continue wearing the lenses, and you can't convince that child to carry on? How do you exit at that point? How do you exit 3 lenses in and you're still not getting a successful fit? So these are all things that you have to think prior to starting the Ortho-K. And it comes down also to patient selection, which we'll talk about at a later stage. But you got to look at that fit before you start. And just from a financial perspective, consider how easy or difficult this fit will be, and then bring that into your pricing. So in the end, even with all the work you do, you still want to make some profit. You want to be there tomorrow, pay the lights, pay the bills, pay the staff, so you can do another Ortho-K fit. So in our header for our lecture here, I started with fees. Don't give it away for free, or should I? And that's a big topic, because some people feel if they offer this service for free, they're going to get more feet in the door. And I tend to disagree with this philosophy a bit. And some people might do it with great success. I'm not saying don't do it. Just on a personal level, I never went for that. My approach has always been it's a service and it's a value. And once people understand the value of the service you're providing, they'll be willing to pay for it. I never made Ortho-K about pricing. You have to talk about it, but I never made that the focus point. I went with benefits. I went with what it's offering, and rather work from that value perspective. And in the end, the fee becomes less of an issue. But you got to look at your market, obviously. You got to be aware of what people around you are doing. But even saying that, in our practice, we were definitely not the cheapest Ortho-K practice. By far, we were right up there with the most expensive, yet we were one of the busiest Ortho-K practices. So I honestly don't think cheap is better. Cheap won't necessarily bring more patients into the door. There's other value propositions, I think, that will do a better job of getting Ortho-K patients in.
Charl, just to add to that, I think that once people see a contract for those practitioners that are not currently fitting Ortho-K, the contract's going to help explain some of this. And I think, as Jagrut had mentioned, you want to break it down into the complexity, level of complexity, and have different fee structures. And I know what a lot of our accounts do, custom craft, iSpace accounts, they will offer a percentage to cover their hard costs that is definitely not refundable for the situation that Charl mentioned, where the child may refuse to wear the lenses. And another way some practitioners will address it is they will offer to give you a credit that you can use towards soft lenses or glasses in their office.
Yeah, so that's really good points there, Daren. If I was to summarize what we do in our practice, at the very beginning, I say, look, if for any reason it's not working in the first 6 months, it doesn't really matter to me what the reason is. I'll give you all of your fees back except for this amount. And they're pretty happy with that because it removes a lot of risk. And then also we talk about, so it seems pretty like a fair proposition. And then I just make sure that fee that we return covers the all of my chair time, all of that as a base cost. From there, we also make sure we remind people about things like spare lenses, and we start the conversation at the beginning. Like, it's a good idea to consider those from the beginning, so then they know that they may be up for some extra lenses later on. And what we do is we have that planned. Like 8 weeks into it, they get an automated email to say, hey, you can get half off a spare set. And the general rule is, by about 8 weeks, most people are pretty happy and going, unless you've got a super complex case. In terms of complexity, we keep our complexity level pretty simple. It's like 2 prices. The marketing gurus out there, like Seth Godin, will probably tell you need 3. So I'm not averse to that either. But we just kept it like you've got simple and then complex, essentially. Rightio. We do have a Q&A, by the way, at the end of this. So we can go through any specific questions. Charl, were you just about to speak?
Yeah, I just want to finish up with the following. What you want to make sure on an exit strategy is you do not want to lose money. So you have spent certain amounts of money towards buying hardware, to buying lenses. You want to make sure you can at least recuperate that. So the approach we went with patients prior to starting Ortho-K is work and talk to them about the exit strategy. So what we like to do is keep the money in the practice, so offer them alternatives. So one of the practicals you can do, depending on your warranty system, let's say you do start with Ortho-K and it's too complex, so you're not getting the result. You can take one of those warranty lenses and swap them over to a bespoke lens, a GB lens, and then put your patient into a hard lens. So that's one approach, and still keeping going with the patient. The other option that Daren mentioned is swapping them over to soft contact lenses and then providing them with money's worth of soft contact lenses. Now, just from a business perspective, the value you add to those contact lenses is your exit value. It's what you're going to charge the patient normally, but you're obviously not paying that fee from the supplier. So that still leaves a bit of fat in there for you to make a living off the fit, even if it was not successful. So have a discussion with the patient to say, look, we're going to do Ortho-K. You've got a 60, 70, 80% chance of being successful. Let's quickly talk about if it's not successful, what we're going to do in a case like that. Look, I've spent money on getting lenses to you. You've got to understand that. That's part of the contract. You signed it. You're acknowledging that we're doing this. I still like to help you because in the end of the day, it's the relationship between me and you. So what do we do if it doesn't work? Well, I can offer you the following as an alternative. You can discuss rigid lenses. You can discuss soft lenses. So even in the back of the mind, as the fit progresses and it's not successful, the patient still has confidence in you because you do have an exit strategy and they're not feeling they're wasting their money doing this process. And that just gives them a bit more confidence in going through this whole process.
Okay, so let's move on to a next topic here, Charl. Fit schedule, call me. Remember about follow-up. So why don't we talk about in our practices the way that we approach the fitting schedule, and what are the general follow-ups for you?
Well, for me, the first day already starts as a follow-up. So the first day when the patient comes in for dispensing, we place the lens on the eye and we do a full eval. We check the basics. With iSpace, it's quite easy. You want to see the fluorescent imagery on the patient's eye, and you want to compare that with the simulation on iSpace. They need to look the same. You want to look for lens movement. You want to do that over refraction, the refraction over lens. You want to make sure we've targeted the correct myopia correction or hyperopic correction. And you want to make the patient just sit in the chair or lie down on the couch for a good 10 to 15 minutes with their eyes closed. Allow the lens to settle, and then take the lens out and do a quick topography. And at this point, you're not going to see the full map, but you want to see some remnants of that map showing. And most particularly, you want to look for the centration. You want to make sure that everything looks the way you expect that map's going to develop. That for me would be day one. The patients will then sit down with either yourself or your staff member, and we go through a comprehensive insertion removal process, cleaning. We normally give them brochures at this point just to reiterate everything that we've been telling them. And no patient leaves the practice unless they've physically inserted and removed the lens on the premises. So that for me is day one. Then next morning, we'll bring the patient back for an evaluation. Now, here's a good discussion point. Do we bring the patient in with the lenses on eye, or do they come into the practice without the lenses and we put the lenses in the eye? What is your take on this, Jagrut?
So for a very long time now, I've not had a patient wear lenses into the practice, simply for one very clear fact. And no other day and throughout their orthokeratology wear will they wake up, keep the lenses in for any extended period of time, more than say 10 or 15 minutes. Let's just say they are busting, need to go to the restroom before they take their lenses out. There's no other day where they do that. So I don't see there to be any extra information that I'm going to receive in the evaluation. Now, why is this controversial? Well, it's contrary to what John Mountford wrote in his Orthokeratology Principles and Practice textbook. Many people still advocate within their companies wear the lenses in. So how do I tackle this? Well, that's why in Charl's pre-fit evaluation, he's pre-dispensed fit. He gets them to sit in the lenses and wear lenses for a certain amount of time, and then we assess and look for binding and those sorts of things at that point in time. The patient will tell me if there's binding in the first thing in the morning, so I'll be able to see those, assess those cases as and when they come, and then I can make modifications as required. So I personally don't see a need to, but that would be my view. Charl, just so you can be a purist, what's your what would be the counter to that?
I actually do not have a counter. I'm actually a firm believer that people should take lenses out in the morning. And here's my take on this. When the patient wakes up in the morning and they start moving about, eventually that lens will come loose and it will start moving. Now, the way I always explain Ortho-K is you're making a jelly mold. So if you grab that jelly mold and you keep on moving it all over the cornea, it's going to affect the overall reshape. It's going to influence the shape as the patient walks. Because remember, they're not going to wake up, climb in the car and come see you immediately. It might happen, but not in all cases. They might be walking around with that lens for an hour or two. And let's be honest, the inside curves for an Ortho-K lens is not an ideal design for day wear. So if the patient comes in the morning, how certain can I be of that shape after that lens has moved around on the eye for an hour or two? And secondly, if I see staining, is that staining due to the overnight wear, or is that staining there just due to lens movement on the eye? So for me, it hides some of the information I'm after. And you're not going to change a fit on day one. You're not going to bring the patient in on day one and decide, oh, this lens is not working, let's make some modifications to the lens. That's going to only happen 2, 3, or 4 weeks down the line. So day one for me is rather when the patient comes in, I have a quick chat to them. How did it go? What was your experience? Was there any issues or concerns we need to talk about? So it's more about the patient experience for me on day one. Are they comfortable inserting the lens? Were they comfortable sleeping with the lens? How did the removal process go in the morning? Is there certain things we need to go through again, from insertion removal? Should there certain movements or structures in the process that we just need to revisit again and make sure you fully understand it? I will then stain the eye. I will see if there's any staining. How's the health of the cornea doing after an overnight wear? Is this a good candidate for overnight wear? Then I will go to do topography. Now, if there's decentration on the topography, then I'll go back, pop the lens in and see if I can figure out what's going on. But for me, topography maps is much more valuable in telling me what's happening underneath the lens than placing the lens on the eye. Yes, there's value in placing the lens in the eye and doing fluorescein evaluations, but I think we can get more information looking at the topography map at this point.
One thing to point out.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry, Jagrut.
Carry on.
Yeah, one thing to remember for those of you that have not yet started fitting Ortho-K is it's not uncommon for you to see a lens that centers on the eye and then you see a decentered treatment zone with follow-up topography or vice versa. And so I would agree with Charl's point that you can't always judge a book by its cover with what you're seeing, because when the patient's lying down sleeping with that lens, it may behave differently than what you see at the slit lamp.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Daren, just keep in mind when your patient is sitting on the slit lamp, most of them will have a slight unnatural posture. They'll sit a bit more forward. You've got this exceptionally bright light in the eye. You've just installed fluorescein. It's a foreign substance. Most patients will not be in a comfortable state at this point. And if you haven't been behind the slit lamp, go and do it later today or tomorrow. Let one of your staff members shine that bright light in the eye. It's very hard to have a normal blink reflex sitting behind the slit lamp. And therefore, the blink forces have an influence on the lens. And obviously, you're in an upright position when you're sleeping, you not. So the tip that I was given years back, which I use, is when the patient's in the chair, ask them to close the eyes and then squeeze the eyes for about 10 seconds. And then on that opening of the eye, you generally get a better idea of where that lens is going to settle underneath the closed eyelids. So just repeat again, you ask the patient to sit in the slit lamp, get everything ready, ask them to close their eyes and just gently squeeze their lids 10 seconds, count down to 10 and ask them to open and have a quick look at where that lens centers. And that generally gives you a much better idea of where the lens is going to center underneath the lens than just having the eyes open and you having a look with the slit lamp.
Just a final thing then we should probably go before we move on to the next topic is just a quick comment on solutions. So in the US and in most markets, with our product at least, we recommend using peroxide-based systems, using a saline insertion type insertion drops, or things like, in your market or the US market, we're looking at things like Refresh, Preservative Free, and Oasis. In terms of daily cleaners, we're looking to use things like Serene Extra Strength. And what I just invite other practitioners who are more experienced in orthokeratology to do, just for the benefit of others, is to in the Zoom group chat, put in your personal favorites that you use for orthokeratology. In New Zealand, at least, we go pretty hard. We want to go for the maximum. So, like, we'll use a Progen every 6 weeks. We'll have an in-office mini lab soak. We'll use peroxide and a daily cleaner. And that's just because we know that patients won't do everything. So if we give them the whole gambit, they'll probably end up doing something more hygienic than we would expect otherwise. Right, next topic.
Jagrut, just a quick follow-up on that. We've talked about first day, day 1, when will be your next follow-up?
From there, it's 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month. It depends on the fit and how things are going there. But yeah, generally I follow that. Do you have the knowledge base article for us there, Charl, that you could post into the group on that?
Yep. I can post the knowledge base link for everybody. This is something that's on the iSpace website, and we call it the 101 article, which is a basic step-by-step process of going through the Ortho-K process. And we have in there the follow-up procedures and more or less what you should be doing with these follow-up procedures. So we've got next day follow-up, we have a 2-week follow-up there. I used to work in 2-week cycles. If I find that after day 1, everything is going to plan, I'm more than happy to see that patient 10 days, 14 days down the line. If on my day 1, I see things are not going to plan, I will then shorten those follow-up times and see the patient on a more regular basis until we can either figure out the issue or I can see the fit's taking off and it's doing its job. So when will you replace a lens? When do you decide, Jagrut, when the lens is not going to plan and when I need to redesign the lens? What kind of time period are you thinking?
Yeah, so the minimum time before I redesign a lens that isn't grossly decentered or having a central island or anything like that is a minimum of 2 weeks, between 2 weeks and a month before I'm going to look at replacing a lens. So I really let the mold or the reshaping lens do its job, and it's just something that, you know, it's that old adage that lawyers say, you know, you've just got to hurry up and wait, because you go, oh, I just want to change something, but in many times you don't. And obviously with software-based designs or even really good empirical fitting, 9 times out of 10, the fit on day 1 improves by day 14. You know, so that's just would be the pill that I'd look at as it's that not too loose, not too tight approach. So Charl, let's move on to the next topic that everyone. So, oh, by the way, these topics that we've got are what the audience, so everyone that's here, has actually emailed into us. So it was actually quite a cool use this week where we got whoever. Thank you to everyone who emailed in, but we got this list sent to us, and we're just trying to get through as many of them as we can. So Charl, dry eyes, shall we right? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, dry eyes is a big topic, and the question is always, do I fit a dry eye patient? Do I not fit a dry eye patient with Ortho-K? And if I want to fit them, how do I go about it? So what is your take on that, Jagrut?
Well, so one question that comes up a lot on many of the forums, whether it's on Facebook or on these email forums that we're on, is, you know, and this is usually from a new practitioner, is a patient with dry eye contraindicated to do orthokeratology? Well, our view is that as long as you manage and treat the dry eye appropriately and understand its cause, then there's no reason why you can't treat these patients with orthokeratology. Many soft lens patients who actually switch into orthokeratology do it because they have day wear dryness. To me, when I hear that, the first thing I do is I then treat the dryness, and then I also will do Ortho-K. So that's kind of our approach. So there are probably types of dry eye that it would be a no, like I'm talking about, and this is, the very severe end of the scale, where you'd need to do a lot of treatment before you go in, and in some cases, I've had patients where we'd have to do around the LipiFlow and an IPL, and then we start the orthokeratology treatment. So that would be something that I'd recommend, or the one approach is, if they talk about dryers or have dryers, you treat that first. It just makes your whole experience and the whole process go better. It also means that you're going to be increasing your services or fees to the patient, because most dryer programs come with additional costs for products and things. If I've got a mild to moderate dry eye, usually I will start the fit within within about 2 weeks of active treatment. And active treatment will be may include things like compressors at home, washes, oral medication, topical medication, and then obviously drops as well that are tailored more towards their dry eye. And the approach, if you look on the left-hand side of the slide, that's a new tool that we've developed. It's not yet available, but the idea behind it is that the practitioner selects what they've got in front of them in their chair, and then that algorithm creates an indication of the type of dry eye. Then you can more adequately treat and manage. You can set your treatment and management, as everyone has their own special cocktail of treatment that they do for their dry eye practice, or those in the dry eye sector do. But we don't really know which one's the best, and we just know that lots of ours work. So this will maybe help towards the research along that. Charl, how about you? What was your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the consensus is here that dry eye is not a contraindicator. Obviously, it takes more management. So all I want to add here is a practical tip, and this is when we remove the Ortho-K lens. Typically with these dry eye patients, there is a higher risk of getting lens adherence in the mornings. And so if this lens is tightly adhered to the epithelial cells and the patient just wakes up and takes his DMV remover and pulls the lens out, there is a higher risk of pulling some of those superficial epithelial cells off. And you'll see this as a central plug. Most patients will complain about morning decreased visual acuity that throughout the day starts to improve. So the practical thing I'd like to tell all my patients, and this comes from hard-learned lessons, is when they wake up in the morning is to install an artificial tear over the contact lens, and then using the bottom lid, just gently nudge the lens until the seal's broken and allow enough time for fluid to flow in underneath the lens. The patient will feel this as the lens starting to move freely, and then take the DMV remover and remove the lens, and just helps to protect the epithelial layer from that adherence process. Hyaluronic acid, for those who have it, is definitely one of my go-to drops for dry eye patients with Ortho-K, preservative-free, of course. I don't know if you have any other takes on that, Jagrut.
No, not really at all. Yeah, so hyaluronic-based drops, I don't think they're available as much in the US, or it's not as common at the moment. But there are a whole bunch of dry treatments coming out. You've got products that are medications that are undergoing clinical trial at the moment in phase 3 FDA. It'll be a very exciting space to look at what our treatments will be, and it's really just going to be time on eye is what we're trying to reduce there with those treatments. With respect to the next question we got in was around, well, this is really something that I've heard Charl say many times in lectures. You know, what's the difference between squirrels and rats? Well, it's just marketing. And what it really comes down to is what's our approach and what's our strategy. So I've done quite a few different things in terms of marketing with orthokeratology in New Zealand. But what I was kind of hoping for is a little bit of audience participation here. If anyone is based in the US and would like to kick things off and share something, just unmute your microphone and share a few words with us around, you know, what you found works from two topics. First is patient retention and referral, and the second topic is new acquisition. So I don't mind if anyone wants to unmute right now and share a few words. You know, Raymond, you're there, and you may have a bit of an idea or a bit of a comment. Would love to hear from some people.
If anybody's unable to unmute your microphone, if you just type a message in the box, and I'll do it from the administrator end.
So just while we're waiting for someone to unmute, and if you want to write in the chat box, Charl, would you want to kick things off with the conservative strategy first?
Yeah, for me, it's always been word of mouth. I still think your best advertisement comes from your own patient base. So when it comes to Ortho-K, most of the Ortho-K patients that we had in the practice came from friends and colleagues referring us for the service. So we did two approaches. One is, if I can recommend, try and fit somebody in your office, in your practice. if you have a receptionist or one of the ladies and they're into Ortho-K, that is probably one of the best endorsements that you can get, because somebody comes in and their first concern is, does Ortho-K work? And you say, yeah, of course, Susan in the front office, she's got Ortho-K and she's quite happy, and she'll be more than willing to talk to you about her experience with Ortho-K. That just gives it gravity, and people immediately have a bit of acceptance towards Ortho-K. In my case, I also fitted my wife, so we would go out and people would hear I'm doing Ortho-K and they'd say, does it work? And my first thing was, well, talk to my wife. There she is, and she can give you the lowdown. And every time somebody would approach her, the first words out of their mouth is, does it work? And by now she's had this whole marketing spiel done and she knew exactly how to talk to everybody. But find somebody close to you that's your living advertisement. That's the one tip I can give. The other tip, and I did speak to this prior in our office, at the chair, we had this big TV screen on the wall and we had this big computer screen on the opposite side. So what I'd like to do when I do Ortho-K is let the patient sit in the chair. We've done the capturing, we've done the prescription, I've put it into iSpace, and I'm busy designing the lens in real time while the patient's sitting there, or where the parents are sitting behind me, and I try and get them all involved. So I'll explain, I'll do a little lecture every time I design an Ortho-K lens and the patient or the parent grouping is there. And I'll try and explain the basics of what we're doing and how it works. So by the end of that session, I've designed both my lenses, but I've also had buy-in from the parents or from the patient. It's like buying a car. What's the first thing the salesperson's going to do when you're on the car lot? They're going to try and get you into the car and drive it, because they know once you've driven that car, you've got emotional buy-in. You've got a connection to that product, and you're more likely to buy it at the end of the day. So we would do a big thing in the room about designing our lens, the word choices I'd be using, what do you think is going to happen if I do this or that? And so the parents or the patient realizes the complexity of the lens and what they're paying for. And they also have a better understanding of how the process works. Because keep in mind, the moment they walk out of their office, they've got this emotional buy-in, they go home, and then buyer's regret will kick in, or they might have a conversation over barbecue the evening or dinner, and somebody there knows somebody who's an ophthalmologist who's telling them that sleeping with lenses is bad. So here's this poor parent, they're doing what they feel is really progressive optometry. They're putting their child into Ortho-K, and then suddenly they get all this negativity from friends and colleagues about, it won't work, what's this thing they're doing, I've never heard about it, or somebody I know, somebody's uncle's daughter who had it and she lost her eye. You get all these conversations going on. So that patient needs to be reassured that the process they're going through is solid and that it works. So they've already had affirmation in your practice. Somebody in the practice has had Ortho-K, it's working for them. They've understood the design process. They can see the science behind it. And that just gives them better resolution on continuing with the Ortho-K process. So once it is successful, one of the things we like to do is take those selfies. Everybody is now selfie driven. So again, we had this really big screen in our test room. And when we do Ortho-K post fits and these nice bullseye patterns sitting there, I would bring them up, let the patient stand next to it, take a selfie, and then they go and mark it on your behalf. Or you get their permission to do it on your practice website. And just talk about Ortho-K, on your websites. If you have blogs, write about Ortho-K. Make sure that your website shows that you're an orthokeratologist, that you are on top of what's happening and what it's about. The people today read, and most people will go and find the information on the internet. So make sure you do have an internet footprint. Facebook is probably one of the most powerful marketing tools. And I know there's a lot of talk in the news about false media, but make sure that the information you put out there is verified, that it's true, and that people know that you can do Ortho-K. What are your takes,
Yeah.
Jagrut?
Well, one of the biggest things. So what we did with our product is we created this the suite on the right hand side of that image of, you know, what is orthokeratology, what are bespoke lenses, what are these products, and so all of the, I suppose, we dealt with all of the challenges that you might be faced with around the product by creating a very comprehensive evidence-based book. So that's what every patient gets at their initial fitting assessment or initial discussion. Our the way we've worked it in our practices, we've talked to all of our colleagues, so we get referral in from other optical and optometrists. We get referral in from pediatricians, ophthalmologists, and teachers. So we've approached it by talking to our peers and other specialties. So that's how we've kind of built a referral network. Obviously, as we all know, word of mouth is the key that we're trying to aim to achieve. When we started spending money, we actually used a combination of Facebook advertisements, Google advertisements, and radio. So, and then we tracked the source. But it was really interesting because you need the combination, if you have a budget for it, of all three to really ramp it up. And you can go from, let's say, conservatively, a new practitioner's seeing 1 or 2 new fits a month. You can take that up to about, 10, 15 new patients a month just by using a strategy around that combines so local radio and targeted, geo-targeted social media and internet posting. Because what happens is they'll be driving in the car to school, they listen to something on a radio station, and then they get reinforcement when they go and search the news about what's happening in the current situation. There'll be a little banner ad there, and then they'll be searching on Google and find something else, or Facebook, and it just crops up. So there is a specific strategy around that. If anyone wants to know a little bit more, we can tell you about what we spent on it when we were doing it. We did it for about a year, and we spent about, I don't know, $8,000 a month, and just to see how much it would grow. What that did, and that's a significant investment. We're talking $100,000. But what that actually did was that when we did it, this is a few years ago now, it just really built this massive machine. So I'm not suggesting that anyone has to do that straight away, but the first thing I did when I first started orthokeratology was I wrote and physically called to every sports club in my region. There were about 150 of these sports clubs and schools, and then I just kept talking to them, and just to let them know about this subspecialty area. Not actually selling it to them, but just saying, hey, there is this product and it does work. It's an alternative to laser surgery. As a result of that, it's just grown the practice. But a lot of these things you can do for free. The other thing that I've been playing with this year, and I'd recommend it now, up until we were locked down, every day I would post on Google Posts. Google Posts is free, costs you nothing. But what I'm finding it's doing is it's increasing traffic to our website. It's part of Google My Business. So that was something that we found it's a very inexpensive way, and just a staff member's tasked with it. Much like how Ken on the Facebook posts, you'll sometimes put these amazing cases that you do. What I found really cool was this: we just put a very simplified image, quite a cool image like the ones that you post, a very short blurb that's tailored to a patient to just talk about the work that you do in your practice, and just the concept. Hey, this is OCP, and and for this we treated it with a scleral lens. Just as simple as that, with a cool picture, and the amount of views you get and the amount of calls you get start to really increase. And I just made it really simple and did one a day, because one a day is pretty manageable. It's less than 5 minutes for someone in practice, and you just we image everything, anterior and posterior imaging. So one day it might be on macular degeneration, the next day it might be an Ortho-K fit, the next day it might be a daily wear rigid fit. But that's something that I don't think people are using, and I don't see a reason why you can't, and it doesn't cost you anything. So that would be my take on it anyway. Charlotte, any other final thoughts before we move on to the next topic?
I think you've raised plenty. I just want to maybe highlight certain things. The one thing for me that's quite important is the referral base from IV optometrists. That was probably one of the highest areas of referrals, was from other optometrists to the practice. And how do you get to this point is by being out there and talking about specialty lenses, talking about Ortho-K. So think about CPD meetings, thinking about posting some of your cases in one of your local optometry chat groups, be involved in your congresses, do workshops, do posters, just for people to know that you know what you're doing. You need to put out there that you're knowledgeable about Ortho-K, that you can do it. And patients want to be reassured that they're going to the best. So how do they know that you are the best? And that's by putting your cases forward. That's about talking about Ortho-K as an entity, and that you know what you're doing. So it's just getting people confident that they should come to you for the process. And then they'll start coming by themselves. Because I've had plenty of people in the area come up and say, oh, I've heard about Ortho-K, I did an internet search, your name came up quite a bit, and therefore I felt you know what you're doing, and that's why we're coming to you. So it's just being out there and people being aware that you can do Ortho-K and that you have successful cases. Because you can market as much as you like, but if you don't have cases that work, eventually people will stop coming. So you have to have successful cases. So you got to invest in your training, making sure everything's working fine. And then have happy patients at the end of the day, because a happy patient is still going to be your best advertisement going forwards. So just focus on getting your patients happy.
Yeah. Now, just before we move on, Daren, did you have any other kind of comments on this or thoughts? And we are going to be running slightly over time, so I think we may even look at carrying on this to next week, because we've got a few other topics here. But Daren, did you have any other comments?
Yeah, thanks, Jagrut. I think it's a great idea to consider a part 2 of this workshop, because I think a lot of good information is coming up. One of my larger accounts that fits quite a few Ortho-K patients, one thing they do is they have their coordinator, their Ortho-K coordinator, which is a topic in and of itself. But that person goes through, and nowadays with EMR and EHR, you can identify good candidates. And so if you're on the lookout, you can plant the seed, if you will, with those patients when they first present at the practice.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good part of the process as well. Yeah. Now, let's probably finish off, Charl, today on this. I know we've got a few more slides from all the questions coming in over the weeks, but to fit or not to fit, that is the question. So this is really about the whole, do I say yes or do I say no? And the trap that any of us have gotten into that's fit orthokeratology for a while is, yeah, let's give this a crack. And then all of a sudden, you're 6 months in and 7 lenses deep, and you're going, oh, I don't know if I should have done that. So, Charl, have you got some comments on this?
Yeah, I'm looking at the faces of some of the big fitters here, and we're all smiling at this point because we've all got skeletons in the closets as we were learning the Ortho-K trade. I think for me, in essence, it boils down to motivation. You know, is your patient motivated going through the Ortho-K process? And 2, is it physically possible? Is it within your range of doing Ortho-K? We can unpack those 2 comments, but for me, that's the essence of should I go or should I stay, is how well motivated is the patient to go through the process? What's the driving force? What's the rhythm? What's in it for me? And can I physically reshape that cornea? And do I have the right tool set to reshape that cornea? Because at the end of the day, coming back to marketing, you're only as good as your last fit. You need to be successful in your fit to drive more patients through the door. So what makes a good patient is a long discussion, and I'm not sure if we have enough time to go through everything right now, but we can definitely catch up on this on the next round.
Well, maybe we start with maybe we start and finish with this topic this week. We'll start with let's start with Ortho-K ranges, Charl, and then next week we'll talk about a couple of specific examples and carry on with the rest of the list.
Yeah, for me the ranges, you know, I like my analogy. So it's like a tree. It's planting a tree. When you start off with Ortho-K, you're very susceptible to the environment and the forces. You're still learning the craft. So my advice to you is keep it simple. You want to stay with the basic myopes. You don't want to really go higher than the -4, -450s. You want to keep your astigmatism low. If you're doing with the rule, don't go beyond -150. If you're going against the rule, you might even want to drop that down to -0.75. We do know against the rules are a bit more difficult to reshape. So keep it simple, learn the craft. There's a lot more about Ortho-K than just designing the lens. It's the whole management of the process. So the rule that I normally follow is, how do I manage my patient after day 1? So one of the basic rules I followed, whatever the prescription is, you're going to 1/2 that. So whatever that script is that night, you can subtract 1/3 to 1/2, and that's more or less what you can expect the next day's target power to be. So that's a very conservative approach. So if you're dealing with a -4, you can expect that patient on a conservative basis to be maybe a -2 or a -250 the next day. The following night, they're going to come down to a -125, and then the following night, -0.75. So how do you manage the patient through that process? You know, do you fit on a Monday? Do you start on a Saturday? You know, can the patient sit at home for a day or two if the vision's not optimal? Do they have backup spare glasses that's underpowered that they can wear and give them vision? Can they just go through life a bit blurred for a day or two until they sort it out? So those are the basic things you got to learn. You got to understand the whole molding process, how to manage the patient, how to deal with troubleshoots. So once you're comfortable with that, once your tree's grown a bit and you're a bit more robust, then you can move on to those intermediate level fits. Now, for me, intermediate would be anywhere in SWER between -450 and -650. You've learned a bit more about astigmatism at this stage, and now you can push up to those -350s. Maybe you're a bit adventurous and you want to start looking at those regular pose LASIKs if you're keen on doing something like that. And why not introduce hyperopia at this stage? And that's something our space can assist you with. So again, dealing with the -650, you can appreciate if you follow that 1/2 rule, the next day there might be a -3, -350, you know, so that's not functional vision. How do you manage that patient through that transition phase? Same with the astigmatism. We know these higher minus cases can take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks before they resolve and get to the final point. I say to patients, it's like making red wine. The longer we wait, the better the result, you know? So just hang in there. And so this takes a while to gain experience working in this realm. And then if you've mastered that and you still find Ortho-K exciting, then go to the advanced or experience level. And this is where you start tackling powers like -650s to the -8s. You want to maybe do that -4 sill that's been lying there. You want to start dealing with residual astigmatism where you do bitoric fits if it makes sense to do so. What about introducing a hyperopic compound astigmatic fits? Let's start playing a bit more with irregular lasers. You know, then you start expanding those cases that you shouldn't do, but only if you have a lot of experience and you understand that there's a higher risk factor of not getting to the perfect reshape at the end of the day. But for me, that's the guideline of fitting ranges that we should be dealing with. So depending on where your experience level is, start with the basics and then move your way up to those higher powers.
Awesome. Just a quick comment there from Ken there, Charl, was around, hey, look, maybe when we pick up this topic next time, this might actually be a good time to pause. But wait, there's more next time. One of his comments was, you know, maybe we can pick up the discussion around that it's not just RX, and that's when we could probably have a couple of slides on corneal shape, etc., and other factors, dry eye, ethnic background, all those sorts of things. That may be quite a nice discussion to start off with, but yeah, absolutely, can take your point. It's not just RX where we are oversimplifying it. It's because it's such a large topic, and as you know, like for example, there are some reshaping lenses and lens designs, and those who do custom design will know that they can pretty reliably get a very high myopic prescription out very quickly if a certain set of criteria are met. Whereas other cases of the same high myopic prescription can take a lot longer, you know, due to, like, you know, the corneal shape, the rigidity factor of the cornea, all these sorts of things. So without overcomplicating it and without underplaying it, yeah, let's probably pick up this lecture next time on with a pretty heavy topic, but we could probably start there at this slide.
Yeah.
What do you think, Charl?
And Ken raises a good point there. Sorry, Angela. He did a wonderful talk using the pentacam to evaluate the cornea. And if you haven't seen that talk, that's definitely something I can recommend to revisit. Ken, is there a recording of that available that people can go to? Thumbs up. If there's a link, do you mind posting it into the group section? Yeah.
I was looking to turn the thing on. Which talk are you talking about? Because I've done a few.
The one I saw was just looking at the matrices of the Pentax, the Oculus Pentacam, as to, you know, corneal shape and looking at elevation, heights, and stuff like that.
Did I do that? Was that the one I did last week?
No, that was one of your earlier lectures. I didn't catch the last one you did.
Okay, if it was one of the earlier ones, it's either archived on the Oculus site, or I even have it on my website. If you want, I'll stick up a link there and people can go to see it.
Yeah, it'd be great if you don't mind just putting the links up there.
Sure.
And so it's, you know, prescription is a basic guideline, but obviously you've got to evaluate the cornea, and there's a number of aspects that one can look at, which is a whole topic on its own. And then maybe just quickly touching upon motivation and personalities. For me, the key point is the patient needs to want to do it as well. You need buy-in from the patient, and you've got to look at personality types as well, vocation. What's the reason? What's the motivation for them wanting to do Ortho-K? You know, if you're sitting with a hyperopic patient, and it's early presbyopia, can you do them versus somebody who's a presbyope and they're -150? Should you do them? Because in their mind, they can read comfortably, and it's just their distance vision that's not clear. So now, no matter how many times you tell that patient, but look, when I do Ortho-K, your distance vision is going to be clear, but you're going to lose your reading. And I promise you, I've gone through this. I've told people over time and again, yeah, but you're not going to be able to read comfortably. And they said, that's fine. Then we do the Ortho-K, they come back, and what's the first thing they say? I'm not happy, I can't read. And we've all had these experiences. So one of the things I would, for instance, do is first put them into soft lenses and tell them, can you read? And they're going to go, no, I can't. I said, well, that's what Ortho-K is going to do. And they say, yeah, but, you know, in the evenings I take my soft contact lenses out. I said, yes, but with Ortho-K, that's not possible. Oh, no, I didn't think about that. You know, so no matter how many times you tell patients, they don't listen. So it's always great to put them physically, try and put a shoe on that foot and let them experience the process. So that would be a good time to start discussing monovision, and will they be capable of handling monovision? Do you try and put some aspherics into the optics to try and create a bit more of a multifocal effect? No, so that's when you start experimenting with stuff like that. Any other takes, Jagrut?
Sorry to interrupt. I'm thinking, since it's been an hour and I know some of our attendees have allotted only an hour because they have other obligations.
Yep.
Maybe it's a good time now to take some questions and answers, and then we can pick up on our next workshop these other issues that we did get to today.
And the next workshop is going to be exactly the same time next Wednesday. So where you found the resource, you'll be able to find it again. Is the login. If not, again, email me and I'll send you a link to join us next week. Thank you.